In the dead of night, along the silent border near Kursk, the darkness pressed down like a suffocating shroud. For hours, nothing stirred. Villages lay quiet, windows shuttered, fields still beneath the heavy August sky. But the silence was not peace. It was the sharp intake of breath before a scream. It was the waiting calm before history tore itself open. At 2:30 a.m. on August 15, 2025, the stillness cracked. A faint hum began to rise above the fields. At first it was almost nothing, a whisper, a vibration that could be mistaken for the wind. But the hum grew louder, multiplied, layered upon itself until it became a swarm. From the black horizon, 60 Ukrainian drones emerged, their engines buzzing like a plague of metallic insects, their wings reflecting no light, their shadows blending with the night. Each one cost less than a used car. Together, they carried a price tag under $300,000. Yet they were aimed at targets worth billions. Ahead of them stood Russia's most advanced defenses, S-400 missile batteries, Panzer gun systems, radars glowing with artificial eyes, electronic warfare towers pulsing with invisible waves. Weapons that governments believed invincible. Weapons that now faced fragile machines built from plywood, plastic, and consumer electronics. What happened next would burn into memory as one of the most terrifying demonstrations of modern war. First wave. 10 reconnaissance drones soared high, invisible above 10,000 feet. Their lenses swept across the border, mapping bridges, fuel tanks, and armored vehicles. From their vantage point, the ground was alive with Russian steel, columns of tanks waiting, fuel depots gleaming with stored energy, convoys idling beneath floodlights. Every detail was fed to a command center deep inside Sumy, where operators watched with pounding hearts. Below them, 25 electronic warfare drones drifted deliberately into radar range. They were not built to destroy, but to confuse. Their antennas spilled static into the night, drowning frequencies in noise. Russian operators saw their screens blur, signals break, targets vanish and reappear. The air became haunted with phantoms. At the lowest level, 25 strike drones hugged the terrain, their small rotors slicing the air. Each carried a PG-7VL warhead, capable of burning through the thick armor of a T-90 tank. They were the knives hidden beneath the cloak, waiting for the right moment to plunge. The plan was brutal in its simplicity: overwhelm billion-dollar defenses with swarms of machines costing a fraction of a fraction. Force Russia to waste missiles worth millions on targets worth thousands. Then strike decisively when the defenses opened. At 2:52 a.m., Russian systems awakened. The Kursk for electronic warfare array surged with a jamming pulse. GPS frequencies bent and broke. Drones swerved off course, colliding in the dark, nearly crashing into one another. Operators in Sumy held their breath. If even one reconnaissance drone fell, the strike would unravel. Then came the retaliation. The first Panzer system spat fire, launching surface-to-air missiles into the night. Each interceptor cost $65,000. Their trails arced like burning spears, racing toward fragile wooden frames. An S-400 battery loosed a missile worth nearly $2 million. Its engine roared, its guidance locked, its nose pointed at prey. But the prey was too small, too slow, too cheap. The missiles screamed past, missing shadows barely larger than a man's body. In minutes, Russia had spent more than $10 million, yet the swarm still buzzed forward, unbroken, relentless. Inside the Ukrainian command post, engineers triggered backup systems. Gyroscopes costing less than $200 stabilized the drones, pulling them back into formation. The crisis turned into revelation: the very weakness of the machines, their fragility, their imperfection, made them untouchable. Billion-dollar defenses were powerless against toys. And then, the strike began. Firestorm. 5 drones dived at the Russian fuel depot. Their warheads were small, mere kilograms of explosives, but they struck where it mattered. The first slammed into a tank holding 10,000 gallons of diesel. A geyser of fire erupted, climbing 300 feet, painting the night sky in red and orange. Seconds later, 2 more drones pierced adjacent tanks. The explosions chained together. 50,000 gallons ignited, the blaze expanding like the birth of a star. Villages 15 miles away saw the fireball rise. Windows shattered. Shock waves rolled through the earth like thunder from hell. As the depot burned, Ukrainian HIMARS batteries opened fire. Rockets streaked across the sky, each loaded with tungsten fragments. They fell on the assembly ground where 40 tanks stood ready. The air screamed, the earth shook, and armor split like eggshells under a hammer. At least 15 tanks were disabled in minutes. Others erupted as stored shells cooked off, sending turrets spinning into the air like monstrous toys. The battlefield was chaos. Russian gunners tried to respond, but the heat from the depot blinded their sensors. Tracer fire ripped across the darkness, hunting for ghosts. The drones slipped through, low and steady, like executioners with no fear. The bridges. At 3:18 a.m., surviving drones turned toward the Sim River. 2 great steel bridges loomed, each carrying thousands of tons of supplies daily, fuel convoys, ammunition trucks, armored vehicles. Russia had reinforced them with concrete and mined them with demolition charges. Yet those precautions became their doom. 8 drones skimmed the water's surface, buzzing like hornets. Russian guards opened fire with heavy machine guns, tracer rounds stitching the night. 2 drones disintegrated in mid-air, but 6 pressed on, diving into the hidden mines. The result was apocalyptic. 40,000 pounds of explosives detonated in a single breath. The bridge folded in on itself, its steel spine snapping, its concrete bones hurled into the river. A roar thundered down the valley, fragments of rebar spinning through the air like spears. The second bridge met its fate minutes later. Fuel tankers crossing its span were struck, erupting into fireballs that cascaded flames onto the structure. Heat warped the beams, bolts screamed as they tore free, and the roadway sagged like melted wax. By 3:25 a.m., both supply arteries were crippled. Ukraine had spent less than $50,000 on drones. Russia lost bridges worth hundreds of millions, and with them, the blood flow of its northern front. Retaliation. Humiliation cut deep. At 3:40 a.m., Russia struck back. 4 Iskander ballistic missiles launched from Belgorod, each carrying a warhead heavier than a car, traveling at hypersonic speed. At the same moment, 8 Su-35 fighters roared into the sky, loaded with air-to-air missiles and guided bombs. It was a retaliatory strike worth over $400 million, unleashed against drones that had cost less than $300,000. Radar screens lit up in Ukraine. Operators watched as the missiles streaked across borders, their trajectories blazing. Ukrainian defenses answered. Patriot batteries fired interceptors worth millions apiece, but precision and training paid off. One by one, the Iskanders were annihilated mid-flight, breaking into fiery fragments before reaching their targets. The fighters fared no better. NASAMS and IRIS-T systems locked on, launching salvos into the sky. 3 Russian jets were torn from the air in minutes, fireballs tumbling into open fields. 2 more were struck as they attempted bombing runs, their payloads detonating harmlessly in the clouds. The survivors fled, dropping their weapons to lighten the load, abandoning the fight. Russia had spent fortunes. Ukraine had spent less than a tenth. The imbalance was terrifying. By sunrise, the border was unrecognizable. Fuel depots smoldered, bridges lay twisted in rivers, and armored units were reduced to charred husks. Black smoke rose into the sky, blotting out the morning light. The land looked cursed, haunted by the machines that had swept through it. And yet, amid the ashes, another story emerged. Ukrainian soldiers moved through the wreckage, carrying wounded Russian troops from burning vehicles. They offered water, bandages, shelter. What could have been scenes of vengeance became moments of mercy. The message was as clear as the flames that still licked the horizon: war was not only about destruction. It was about survival, about humanity refusing to die, even in darkness. Statistics told one story: hundreds of millions lost in Russian armor and infrastructure against drones built from spare parts. But the deeper story was something else, that the future of war had changed forever. That cheap machines, fragile and small, could unmake the mightiest of arsenals. That technology had leveled the battlefield, and terror itself had become industrialized. The question now lingers like smoke: will these low-cost swarms continue to rewrite the rules of modern war? Or was this night an anomaly, a ghost story whispered across borders? The answer is not yet written. But the silence along the Kursk border will never sound the same again.